You have questions, we have answers. This is Jane Muller.
And this is Ken Muller. Welcome to our show, All About Real Estate with Ken and Jane. And first and most importantly, I want to wish all the moms out there a happy Mother's Day. And to you, Jane, Nancy, and Heidi, happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
You guys are all hardworking moms and hope you have a wonderful day. And thank you guys for coming back this Sunday morning to be our guests again to talk about deed fraud. And if you guys want to briefly just introduce yourselves, that would be great. Start with Nancy, please.
Well, I'm Nancy Pinkin, the Middlesex County Clerk, former East Brunswick Councilwoman. I've been on the Planning Board, former Assemblywoman, and as I said, now County Clerk. And I have with me Heidi today. Heidi's our resident expert on recording. She's the Supervising Data Control Clerk in the Middlesex County Office of the Clerk. She's been with us for almost 10 years. She does a lot of the what we call e-filing, e-recording, working with companies and individuals who are submitting their documents. We accept them both electronically and in paper. And her career began after surviving the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center. And she has 2 decades of experience in IT positions, which include the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation, where she was able to use her skills to contribute to technology advances in the Office of the Clerk. So we're grateful to have Heidi working with us and all of our staff that are serving every day as public servants to assist the residents and the businesses of Middlesex County.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So last week's show, just to recap briefly, we didn't cover nearly all the content there is on deed fraud. We kind of tipped the surface on it that deed fraud is basically, it's not only third parties can fraudulently falsify a deed and record it, or it could be within the family, members of families that have a deceased one or somebody who's elderly, they could fraudulently try to convey the deed. So there's a lot of categories to deed fraud. And now with the introduction of electronic signatures and notary services, that even adds an additional complication to the matter, right?
Now, one thing I'll say about that is the Middlesex County, we have a lot of resources to address these things and a lot of things at our fingertips. And one of them is the Office of the Surrogate, which is also very important when there are those issues with family transactions and things like that. We right away refer them to the surrogate. Sometimes we refer them to, and probably the realtors are doing this as well. We're referring them to the surrogate's office to help them with probating their will and that type of thing so that they can then go on and do whatever property transactions. So property, real estate transactions are so complicated. There's so many different aspects, but when we need to, we refer to the prosecutor. When we need to, we refer to social services. If it's sometimes you have elderly who maybe need to transition to another place to live, a way to people be cared for. There's property transactions there as well. So there's a lot of services that we try to coordinate to serve our public.
So I don't know, Heidi, since you have the IT background, why don't you talk to us a little bit about how how is the new laws with the electronic transfer, how is there accountability? Like the traditional deeds always had the wedding signatures, they had the notary seal and or stamp, and then it was, but with the electronics, I would think with all the cyber security issues going on, there would be easy for the thieves to, tap into that and kind of, falsify those electronic documents and signatures.
It's a little of both, and actually it's harder for someone to perpetrate a fraud electronically because of all the metadata. Everything is saved. They have to have contracts with the vendors to say they are who they are, that type of thing. It got a little difficult with LLCs. And there was an example where they tried to fraudulently transfer $1 million property. It was over in excess of $1 million in South Brunswick. And it was actually the buyer, and the sale fell through, and he obtained a draft of the deed. And he went to a vendor, and he had an LLC, so he went to a vendor, and he tried to record the deed to himself, this, in excess of $1 million property for $1.
Oh, wow.
So,
wow.
So that raised a red flag because unless it's a relative transfer, there's some reason that's very...
Right. It was,
doesn't seem too
and
clever.
actually that person was prosecuted by the developer. They
Sure.
was K-Land. They prosecuted that individual.
Wow.
But it was easier to prosecute that person because everything is saved. Every rejection was saved. All of his content that he provided to the vendor was saved. So in a way, it makes it more difficult than for someone who's walking in, and then it's like their word against whoever's word and memory, that type of thing. So there's good and there's bad. Definitely over the years, especially since COVID, probably 80% or greater of the recordings, they're all electronic submissions. We have a very tight relationship with our vendors where we don't want individuals to be able to use those services. We had a homeowner that obtained a payoff for her mortgage, bounced her checks a couple of times, and they gave her a copy of a discharge. She signed up with the vendor and tried to discharge the mortgage. But ultimately, her too, she wound up the prosecutor. She came in for a certified copy. So everybody was watching that transaction. And then I don't know what the outcome was, but it made it more difficult for her. So there's good and there's bad to it. And certainly a lot of walk-ins that try to record things that are like fraudulent. They're usually, most of them are walk-ins.
Yeah, like you
to the
mentioned,
county.
like you mentioned, the discharge of mortgages. So I can imagine now even legitimate homeowners that are out there, there might be some people trying to fabricate a discharge or cancellation of mortgage and bring that in and, mimic it and try to get away paying the mortgage and get it canceled from title. So that's another avenue besides deed fraud that's probably you're going to encounter or you have encountered in your office.
Deed fraud, or like Nancy was talking about, elder abuse.
Where they're duress, so they force them to sign it in front of
People have power of attorney
and they
over their elders, and they try to get a reverse mortgage for
to
their
get
own
them-
benefit when they're in fact abusing that person. We've had that recently also.
It can get complicated too because sometimes when you're at a certain age or if you're medically disabled, if you want to call it that, if you have to go into a nursing home or some type of care, there might be a request that you have to sell your property and turn everything over and then go. So it can get very complicated. And sometimes you have people that are feeling like, well, if you have somebody that care is getting to be a crisis for the elderly, and it's very, very expensive and hard to even find. And then you have people wondering, they see their resources dwindling, and the temptation can be great to do something that maybe isn't in the best interest of the individual who worked and earned that money and saved for that house over the years.
Yeah, and that might be their only major asset, and then the individual comes and they do a reverse mortgage, which means they try to take the liquidate it and then have a mortgage paying back. So it's interesting. There's a lot of different components to this whole thing. How about what can you say for the people out there that want to know more how they can publicly protect themselves? You mentioned at the learning seminar that the Middlesex County Bar sponsor that there's a property alert thing that anybody who owns property in Middlesex County can go to that website to kind of register that. So that way, if there's any recording issues affecting that property, they would be notified via email.
Well, we do have the property alert program, and it's something that there was some legislation pending that every county should do this, but actually every county already does it now, and you can register with the county. It doesn't prevent it from happening, but it's kind of like the alert you get from your credit card.
I was
where
gonna
it
say,
says, somebody spent some money and was it you? And then so we will say you register with us, and Heidi, we talk about how to actually register.
Sure.
So you register with us, and we send you a notification that some activity happened on your property. Now, if you just took out a home mortgage, a second mortgage, or you're moving, then you know what's going on, and you should at that point look at your documents and double check that. But then you want to follow up with us. But it doesn't mean that it wouldn't happen. It's just giving you the alert. But Heidi, why don't you talk a little bit about what people have to do to sign up for that?
So that definitely is the best protection, and there are a lot of residents that pay for like LifeLock, like those type of services. But this is directly with the county. It's a free service. It's called a Property Alert Service. So if you go to our website and then you type in Property Alert Service in the search bar, it'll bring you to the page where you see Nancy's picture. You would create a sign-in using your email address, and then you pick a password. After it validates your email, because the Property Alert Service will send you an email, and when you get that email, you're activating your account. The whole purpose is to confirm that you didn't put in the wrong email address. And then you could put in block, lot, and qualifier if you're in a condo, your township, and then party names. So if your property is not in your name as an individual but a family trust, you would put in your names regardless, and then put in the name of the family trust. And when there's anything recorded, and it works immediately, it works like the same day.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
The same day.
I registered the
Yeah.
property, so we have. I read literally
When we
the
get
next day
home,
as
I
soon as I said. James reminded me. Said, "Make sure you go to that website and register the property." And
Yeah.
I did. I went to that
Because
and
I
it
want
works
him to
exactly,
try it, how to
Exactly.
work.
It's so
we
you
can tell the
You
client.
should. Well,
And
even if
so,
you,
what we
I mean,
tell-
you could be a realtor, doesn't mean, or an attorney, doesn't mean you're exempt from having
Yeah.
something happening. You want to know.
You can have the best
Yeah.
title insurance policy, but that doesn't prevent somebody from trying. So why not nip
Right.
it in the bud before, or
Yeah.
at least get alerted of it, so you can.
I asked him to do it first of all, protect ourselves, like you said. But the second most important reason, I want him use him as a guinea pig. So he know how to
No,
do it.
and it's
When the
exactly
client
like-
call me, I can say, Ken, explain to them how it works.
And it's
Well,
exactly like Heidi
it's
said.
very
It's
simple,
very
he said.
simple. You
Very
just go,
simple.
you just follow exactly. They send
Yeah.
you an email. They just verify it's your email. Then you create a password for yourself.
Very
and then, And
straightforward.
you just put in the block, the lot, and the address, and then the owner name or names.
Right. And then if so I know that it works instantly, even before we verify documents, because a lot of condo owners, they share the same block and lot as many other owners,
Yes,
so they're
that's right.
distinguished by their qualifier number, and they're the ones that would call all the time, because when you get an email of the alert, it gives you the instrument number. So you call up, and it actually gives you the number to contact the county clerk's office. You call up, you give the instrument number, and then you look at it and you tell them what the document is for. Most of the time, if it's a condo owner, it's not really for their unit. It's for somebody else's unit, and then you have to tell them to go back in and put that qualifier number. But it's before we verify our documents. So if it is a fraudulent activity, at that point, it can be voided, and
Yes.
it doesn't have to go through. Once we verify the documents, that means that we usually can't alter it, but this happens before the county verifies that recording date.
So
Okay.
prevention is the key.
Right.
Yeah.
Prevention.
It is like the credit
Yeah.
card alert.
Yeah, which is
that's
useful,
right.
and everybody
Yeah.
has
Right.
probably
Yeah.
experienced
I
that.
mean-
And it happened to us too with the
Right.
credit card, where it was fraudulent, and then we immediately contacted the credit card company.
No,
and
they
then,
contact me.
Well,
Right.
yeah, but they sent you. A
I didn't
text, or
believe who they were. I said, let me
Right.
call you back.
But they normally text
Yeah.
you too. And
Right.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
It's
right.
like the alert before you get your bill.
That's
when
right.
it's on the statement.
Absolutely.
It
That
works the
is
same
the-
way.
Well, you know, these issues on fraud, it's such a bigger issue, and hopefully we can come back with the prosecutor at some point. But the safeties that go into property fraud also include, like, the safeties you want to be sure for your credit card, for your credit checks. You know,
Yes.
people should be locking down their credit checks
Yes.
to make
Yeah.
sure that when you're not buying a property, no one can access your credit reports, but you. When you're ready to do a transaction, then you go to the company. Usually there's 3 companies that people use, and you open that up so that they can now verify your information, and then you close it again. It's like even the debit cards. You know, we meet the county clerks with agents from the FBI, and they'll say, like, on debit cards, like, no one should have a debit card because you have a loss from, if you have a loss from your credit card, you're limited at $50.
Yes.
If you have a debit card, there's no limit. And there's no time frame that they have to research and get back to you. So even when you get a bank card from the bank, they'll give you you're just withdrawing money from your own account. That has a debit card attached. Now you can ask them not to activate the debit card, but still give you the card that you can access your own funds, and that limits more of the cyber theft is happening through the debit cards than the credit cards. So all of our activities that we're doing in our day-to-day transactions, we have to be ever vigilant. Even the emails, I think one of the transactions that happened with a property fraud problem was, I think you might remember this case where somebody was sending their funds electronically to the realtor or the attorney, I'm not sure which one it was, and let's say it said like Smith123 at bank blank, but they made it Smith1234.
Yeah.
And they put that in there, and they transferred that. Somebody interjected that wrong address. They didn't look at it because it seemed so close, and you're doing 8,000 things when you're closing a transaction. They wired that money. It was a young couple that was buying their first house. It was like, I think, a $40,000 deposit. They lost all of that money.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why now title companies are vigilant as to that, and they specifically tell people don't respond to an email. Phone verify. I think they're very cognizant of that issue, and they make sure that you make a phone call and that it's phone verified, but never respond to it because exactly for that case that happened. Yeah, so it is a concern as well. So there's many different fraudsters out there doing all these crazy things.
There's always a reaction, action, and reaction. So even in the case of notary, like now, if you become a notary, you have to take an exam and know and follow the tests so that you know what you're doing. You have to, every time we swear in all the new notaries, we have to verify their identification, but we also give them a statement saying that they are not attorneys, that they are not giving legal advice. Like you may be, so you want to make sure when you're doing a property transaction that you're using the right people, the right experts on helping you with that property transaction. And a notary is just really witnessing the name and the ID that you are who you say you are, but it doesn't refer to the nuances of the documents that you need your realtors and your attorneys to be the experts on.
Okay, very good, Nancy. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after these messages. Okay, welcome back to our show. And once again, happy Mother's Day to all the great moms that are out there, and likewise to Jane, Nancy, and Heidi. So to continue our discussion on deed fraud, we kind of covered what it is, how it can happen, and all the many different ways these clever fraudsters are, invent to create all this havoc. So if a resident in New Jersey suspects they're the victim of deed fraud, what should they do? What should be their first step?
Well, I think it depends on when they find out that there has been a fraud, but usually they should contact our office. We advise them, and Heidi will jump in on this, but we advise them to contact the police. We also notify the prosecutor, and the prosecutor will start researching the issue. They're very experienced at it. Heidi, what would you say? What other things would you say?
So I would agree. The first step would be to contact the county clerk's office to see if there's any activity, because somebody would listen to the homeowner and then go and search land records to see if there's any recent activity. And if in fact there is, the second step is to contact their local police department and file an incident report. And then after that, we usually work with the prosecutor's office, and they work with the local police department accordingly, depending on what's actually happened. So recently, when we had a property owner who went to go pay his taxes, it was on vacant property, and his account was deleted. And so he was told, it was Piscataway, that he didn't own the property anymore. So it was a fraudulent deed transfer for $150,000. So that buyer was really out the $150,000, but they thought they owned the property. So he had to file a police report with the Piscataway Police Department, and then the prosecutor's office worked with that, and he had to get an attorney to get his deed back, his property back.
Yeah, and obviously in that case, I'm sure they caught the perpetrator of that, and they got in
I don't really know.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
Wow. And in that case, do you know if the deed, the fraudulently recorded deed, was an electronic one, or was it the traditional?
It was electronic, but it went through a settlement agent. It went through. It was an insured transaction. So it was, and it was with a New Jersey attorney.
Wow.
Also,
a New Jersey attorney representing the seller,
the fake seller.
So how in the world? Because usually
It happened.
that's what's so interesting, amazing. Because usually any attorney, any title company at the time of the settlement will want the persons all to present their photo IDs, which they make copies of. So they have to have a New Jersey real ID or driver's license or some legitimate document. Maybe usually 2 forms of ID. So all that had to be. Somehow they
impersonated the seller,
right? But
who was a New Jersey resident, and they said they were in Florida, so everything was done through email.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so they were able to maybe scan the photo
attorney,
ID, so it made it easier for them to fake.
They altered everything.
Altered the document.
Again, that's why it's so important, why we are making this push now to really educate the realtors, the bankers, the attorneys, and all of the people possibly involved, and the individuals, so that we can catch it ahead of time. I mean, the other thing, too, is that you want to look for the warning signs if you don't get your tax bill, if you receive an unexpected default notice or something about a loan document on a property you own, but you don't know anything about it. You'd want to don't just think it's a mistake. You want to check that out. You want to discover, like I said, that you might discover that your own property is listed. I think it's happening now on Zillow. I won't say on the real estate websites that are for sales, that your own property might be listed and you didn't list it. So,
yeah, because sometimes now the internet, right? There are a lot of websites privately owned. They're not agents multiple listings. So you can, as a homeowner, you can sell your property without an agent. So that's,
Oh, and you've experienced that with rentals, where sometimes they'll steal the rental information and change the price from $3,000 a month to $1,000 a month, and then try to get the renters to come and then give them the money, convey them the money, and then even though they don't have no rights to the proproperty,
they will meet you in the vacant place or something,
and then say, "Oh, give me the security deposit, maybe," and then the place is yours, and then try to make a quick.
They said, "You give me half, right? Give me this, and I will meet you there. I get the rest."
Because
that was what I was saying in the beginning, that somebody would call somebody and say, you have to meet me tomorrow with your ID and a check, and they do it, which they shouldn't do.
Yeah. Right. There's a sense of urgency, which is one of the warning signs that if something sounds too urgent, that your office will say, "Well, wait a minute." But I thought also your office in the past, you couldn't just show up there and say, "I want this recorded." There was always a delay, right? And you instituted.
Well, we have an electronic appointment system now for both Passport Notary and for registry. We prefer people to do it that way, but they are allowed to walk in. And when they do walk in, they have to show ID. We had somebody who said, "It's my constitutional right, I'm not showing ID." We're like, "Well, you're not showing ID. You're not coming into the state building, the government building." So, it's just a check and balance on everything we do.
Sure. That's, and then what about some of the policies that are in place? I know last week we mentioned that the Middlesex County clerk is working with the other clerks in the state. Are there any legislative policies that you think are coming in the future where you guys are going to tighten your belt? I know that obviously the realtors, the title companies, the attorneys, we all have to do our part. But is there anything on the county clerk level that you guys feel you might institute in the future?
Well, we're always sharing ideas and knowledge and doing things like this, coming up with programs. When we find something that's happening fraudulently, we'll call each other and say, or email each other and say, "Are you seeing this? What are you seeing on a particular thing?" There was a case in New Jersey where a company was going around to people and saying, "I'll give you," let's say the number, it's not a real number, but let's say I'll give you X amount of money if you promise to only use my realtor company to sell your property whenever you're registered to sell it. So they tend to be people that are having that check would be a great thing. And so they say, okay, why not? What's right? It's not illegal. So they when we researched this issue, what happened was we found that the company was fraudulently doing this in many other states, more so than here, but it was kind of creeping up here. And we right away I actually asked Senator Moriarty, who was a consumer affairs expert in his personal life, to put in legislation about this. That's still pending, but it's not illegal to take that action. There was nothing illegal about what was happening, but then the person goes to sell their property and they can't sell it because the company doesn't feel like selling it at that moment. Or you're using the LifeLock company instead of our free property alert program that every county has. And if that company goes under, they have all your information and you might not be getting the information. The alerts are going. You don't know that the company went under and now the alerts are going somewhere, but not to you. So we always do try to work together on all of those issues. Tightening up the notary education program, tightening up the identification. Now we're going to Real ID and things like that. So everything is cyclical. We're always trying to adapt and be as efficient as we can too.
Yeah, and public outreach is key, like having those seminars, those lunch and learn seminars with the Middlesex County Bar, and having the realtors, the title companies, the residents do their part, and collectively we can all work together to combat this issue.
Yeah, and we're doing consumer education whenever we can as well.
Right. Well, we are out of time, but we want to thank you, Nancy Pinkin, the Middlesex County Clerk, and to Heidi Pech for being our guest today and taking time again out of your busy schedules to come back for a second show this morning on Mother's Day. And we want to wish our listeners a very happy and healthy Mother's Day to all the dear moms out there. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.